It's like we were waiting for you.
Okay, so everyone, welcome to the last Baby Castles Game of the Month Club for 2016. And we're doing Her Story.
Woo! Yeah.
All right, thanks. So, what is Her Story?
Maybe we should tell people who we are.
Who we are. So, I'm Alan.
And I'm Oliver. And we both played the game, supposedly, right?
I played it a year ago, and I enjoyed it very much then. Kind of, really dived into the whole mystery of the game. Played it for actually, I guess more than the average. I played 10 hours. I tried to get as many videos as I could. Although at a certain point that kind of got, a little tedious, but, eventually get satisfied. But I got really wrapped up into all the mystery, read a lot of analysis that I kind of used to kind of inform this presentation we're going to go through really quickly to give a little bit of background on the game. I'm happy to talk about it again. So I haven't replayed it too much recently. I mostly just watched all of the clips in order, which kind of gives you another alternate, really interesting interpretation. Actually, we can maybe talk about that later. So yeah, Oliver, maybe.
So I played through Her Story, finished it, and then I pressed random a lot of times on the game and got all the other videos. But I've played it exactly once, just start finish. I haven't really explored quite as much as Alan here, but I still felt like the experience of the game was pretty unique to me, and I feel like that satisfied me. But anyway, Alan?
Okay, so hopefully a lot of us have played at least a good chunk of the game, but let's kind of set the ground for what is Her Story. So it's a game about a woman talking to the police, which is kind of the obvious little tagline here. But what it kind of really is, it's a crime fiction game, so that's kind of its fictional genre, and it's really heavily based on nonlinear storytelling. So there is a linear story that you can kind of piece together through kind of the evidence you get through the game, but the way you play through the game is the game mechanic is Google. So if you can Google something, you can play Her Story is kind of one of the quotes about the game. So you're kind of searching for these different video pieces in this kind of artificially corrupted police database, which is not very realistic, but it gives you this kind of fun mechanic where you're kind of playing part detective, piecing together the mystery, but also part researcher, going through this archival footage and kind of figuring out what happened in this little story. Mm-hmm. And not only is it what happened, so it's a murder. The first keyword that you get in the little search box is murder, and when you bring that up, you get kind of 4 or 5 videos that kind of give you everything from the beginning to the middle to the end of the investigation. In fact, I think the very last video in the search is the very last video of all of the interviews. So you kind of get the very end of the kind of, in some sense, the linear story right at the beginning of the game, which is kind of interesting. And so kind of there's been a lot of ways of approaching the crime fiction genre, and actually Sam Barlow gave a talk a month ago at Playcrafting, and he kind of went over a few of these points, but he kind of talked about this progression of mystery novel writing and kind of how he wanted to encapsulate a little bit of everything that's been done. So there's the basic idea of a whodunit murder mystery, where the real mystery of what happened is who committed the crime. There's also a howdunit, where the murder is not obvious. It's like a locked room murder mystery. So you may have a pretty good idea of who did it, like Columbo, for example. At the beginning of Columbo, you actually kind of more or less see the murder committed, but you don't know exactly how the murder was planned in order to fool the police. And that's something that Columbo uncovers and explains to the audience. And then finally, there's the why-done-it component, in that the actual motivation for the murder traditionally has been something very obvious, jealousy, greed, something like that. There's an obvious motive, but sometimes you can have a story where the motive is not too obvious, and I feel like Her Story kind of captures that as well, because it's not really clear, I think, why exactly the murder in the story happened.
And I feel that this path from whodunit to howdunit to whydunit was in response to how people viewed the crime genre at the time. While over time, people grew sick of the same old tropes, the same old things happening, and it took a lot of mystery out of the mystery genre. So writers had to think of different ways to make that genre still fresh, and this progression from whodunit to whydunit is one of those things. And I feel that Sam Barlow does does the whole kind of overthrowing the tropes very well in her story, and also uses the audience's knowledge of tropes to create to make it to make a to help solidify the whole experience.
Also, one last thing, Her Story is an FMV game, which we haven't gotten a lot of recently, and it's kind of cool to see that kind of genre come back in various forms. So Her Story does not have computer-generated graphics made by computer artists or procedurally generated 3D anything. It's all filmed on camera mostly. I guess there is the kind of the meta layer where you're looking at the computer screen and that's all 2D graphics. But for the most part, you have like a lot of live action video that you're going through.
I don't know about you, but I think that colorful clock that you can open up, that's some pretty sick graphics right
Oh
there.
yeah, there's definitely like a lot of cool stuff going on there. So let's just mention a little bit about who made it. So Her Story is an indie game, and actually won last year the IGF Grand Prize for, I guess it's the Sean McNally Grand Prize, but it's like best indie game of the year basically, in some sense.
Yeah, that's the first time I heard about it.
Same here.
Yeah, and it also won several other from IGF, BAFTA, and the Game Awards for narrative. It won a BAFTA award for innovation. Sam Barlow, by the way, is British, so you may have noticed during the game there's a lot of the story's clearly set in England and Scotland, and there's like a lot of cultural references there.
There are a lot of tea orders. That's like a lot of the videos.
I drink tea, so I don't think that's too strange. And Sam Barlow previously worked on some interactive fiction games, so that kind of informs the kind of the game mechanic here, where he has this experience in doing a lot of parser-based inputting commands using text to produce some action in the game. And so here, a lot of what you're doing is also very similar. You're typing in keywords, trying to figure out what is the right keyword to type in to get what you want. Except here, the keywords you're typing in are you can type in basically anything you want, and as long as it sits somewhere in the database, you're going to get a result. Whereas in old interactive fiction, text adventure games, a lot of the times you want to type something and you want to happen, it's not going to work properly because it's kind of too general to be able to understand anything you could possibly want to do in a text adventure game. And he also worked on Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and I don't know if anyone's played that. I haven't, but
it's actually pretty good for a Wii game that is also a Silent Hill game.
So, yeah, so I think that might be the only big AAA game that he's worked on that's been released, but he has a good amount of experience. And also, it's worth mentioning that Viva Seyfert, who is the main actress in the game, also won an award for Best Performance at the Game Awards. So it's actually kind of, there haven't been too many awards for performance traditionally in various game award shows or game publications. So I think it's actually one of the highlights of the Game Awards is that that's something they're doing. And I think it's pretty well deserved for this performance, basically. And she doesn't have a lot of other video game related work, but she is part of this interesting band, which we may play during the break. Okay. So I just wanted to, we mentioned that really cool, 2D interface, and kind of you see that here, so how does the game feel? We already talked a little bit how it's this crime fiction, police procedural thing with this kind of pseudo-hacking 90s computer aesthetic. Googling is the mechanic, so you kind of, type in any word you want, you're going to get some result. Sometimes you'll get zero search results, but it doesn't feel that bad, I would say, because getting zero results is actually telling you something about what happened as well. It's not what that thing that you thought it would be. There's not. It's been so long that I can't remember a good example, but do you have an example of sometimes something you would type in that you wouldn't get an answer for that you might expect, but
let me think. Not just as a general example, it's oh, I know exactly where this trope is going. I'm going to type that, and then no results.
Right. Yeah.
And it's
so sometimes if you want to search for murder weapon or something very obvious fingerprints, you'll get maybe one video clip of it, and that's actually kind of smart that he puts in you put in the script the one little section that talks about this common trope, but then it's actually not really relevant to actually figuring out what's going on.
Yeah, he takes advantage of a lot of tropes, and some of them are definitely red herring clips, but it's also acknowledging that, yes, I know, you know, the thing.
Right. And also, so I guess mostly we're probably going to talk about the actual murder mystery that happens in the game and interpretations what happened, why that happened. There's actually like a weird meta narrative layer of fiction where there's a lot of hints that you are in fiction, a first person character that's part of the narrative of the game, sitting in front of this computer screen. And actually, who you are is kind of revealed in little bits and chunks as you play through. I think not too many people cared for that part of the game, but it is kind of interesting, and it has like a lot of like surprising little, almost jump scare-ish moments when like the lights flash and you kind of see the reflection of your character in the screen. So it's kind of adds a lot to the feeling of the game.
Yeah, and I feel like the ending, it kind of has that iceberg feel where it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of a small twist, and then you start thinking about it, and then you realize, oh, this is why this ending is actually kind of impactful. But we'll get to the iceberg theory in a bit.
Okay, and I may have a different interpretation than you, so yeah.
Yeah.
And like one last thing I want to mention, so a lot of it, again, is the full motion video. It's this live video, and it's like it's ripped from the headlines. And actually, like Sam Barlow talked about this at Playcrafting, is that a lot of the inspiration for the game was these interrogation videos that were released of Jodi Arias, who is, you may know, is a woman who murdered her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend in Dallas, I think, in Texas. And it was a very public trial about that attracted a lot of media attention. And it's kind of this fascinating thing where, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later, is that you have this woman character, this woman who's been accused of murder, that kind of attracts more attention generally in media than a lot of other murder cases. And so her story plays a lot on that kind of ripped from the headlines style of storytelling. Some may call it exploitation. Yeah. Okay, so another big thing that kind of her story is kind of about, and you can kind of get this from some of Sam Barlow's tweets, is this iceberg theory. So I didn't include the full iceberg theory quote. It's actually a quote from Ernest Hemingway, and it kind of describes the idea that if you're a really good storyteller, you don't have to write everything about the story you're telling. You just, as long as you know everything about the story, and you can kind of convey the things that the reader should know, the reader should also be able to fill in the gaps, because that kind of infrastructure is there built into the story. And kind of the way this quote from Robert McKee tells it succinctly is, if the story you're telling is just the story you're telling, you're in deep shit. So you better be kind of, thinking about telling your story in an interesting way and in a way that allows the reader to be able to kind of fill in the gaps where necessary. But the kind of downside of the iceberg theory is that if you don't really have kind of a good foundation for where the reader can fill in those gaps, and you may want to kind of wrap things up in the end in some fashion, you may not get a very satisfying conclusion. So you may kind of hit this hollow iceberg and get sunk. So, although I will say one of the things I think is interesting about her story is it actually doesn't fall into the trap that these three examples that I have listed here fall into, in that it doesn't give you an actual ending. So all of these three things are like long-form, like narrative. Most of them are Lost in Battlestar Galactica TV shows, but Indigo Prophecy is a game, so it could have maybe done something a little different with its ending. But all three of them try to wrap up their narrative with some like big dramatic conclusion where spoilers, they're in purgatory, or there's some weird techno aliens in Indigo Prophecy, or it's Earth millions of years ago and all Cylons are humans and humans are Cylons anyway. Something. Her story doesn't have like a clear, this is what happened ending to it. It's up to you when you want to stop watching all these video clips from all these recordings that happened many years ago. And like there are a few tiny hints given that first-person meta-narrative about what you may think have some of the things that may have happened after that, but you don't get like this nice wrapped up, or some would say not nice wrapped up conclusion that these other stories might fail on. So let's get into some more spoilers and poof, they're gone. So we're not going to talk about a good amount of spoilers in this presentation. It's, I think, already a little bit long enough as it is, and there's way too many like details and clues and red herrings to actually discuss it in all of her story.
There's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack. Should I do the next slide?
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So, but I will. So I'm gonna. The next slide does have some spoilers on it, and I'll try to. This is also injecting a little bit of my own literary criticism onto the game, so I'll try to keep it a little short and not like too into like theories of what happened.
On air. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the spoilers already disappeared, so you missed them already.
You already missed all the spoilers. But so kind of one of the little literary criticisms I have is her story actually relies a lot on trope exploitation. So I will say one thing is that her story stars a female character, which is rare for games, and actually received a lot of praise when it came out about this kind of very female-centric story in video games. But actually, if you think about it a little bit more, compared to like other narratives of women throughout other types of media, this is actually a fairly common story. This is not too different from a case that you'd see in like Law and Order or something like that, just reframed where it focuses much more on the female character and the police investigation. Also, I think like the acting is great in the game. The kind of the range of things that the actress has to express in the game is like very broad. And it's actually like a well-earned role. It doesn't fall into very egregious tropes like just the femme fatale. Like here on the right, for example, you have a few more tweets from Sam Barlow saying like, 9 out of 10 murderers are men. When a high-profile woman murderer comes along, we don't ask what led to this statistical unlikely event. We instead elevate the exceptional woman to a type, something beyond human, the alien from species, or a sexy emissary of the devil. So I don't think the character in her story falls into this kind of femme fatale trope, but she is certainly playing on a lot of tropes related to kind of evil, kind of conniving women of a certain style. So, and there is some sexually explicit things, but it's kind of not explicitly, I wouldn't call it sexy in any way. So yeah. And then there's a few other tropes I mentioned here. So kind of evil twins are the stuff of fairy tales. Her story does like actually have more than I remembered. Like when I was watching the full video from front beginning to end, there's actually a lot of like direct references to a lot of different fairy tales. So it is something that actually the game does play into a lot directly. So I don't think it's entirely negative. I think it really adds a lot to the richness of kind of what it's going for. But it also is kind of this, it's just a trope where there's a lot of like real twins in real life that aren't like, not evil inherently because they're twins. They don't have like weird, mysterious, like secret meetings where they plot to share boyfriends or things like that. So this thing generally doesn't happen. And also, some people may think that the story is about multiple personality disorder, which is a possible interpretation if you consider tropes of multiple personality disorder as it's traditionally been presented in crime fiction. But real, what's now called dissociative identity disorder doesn't really work like that, how it's presented exactly in the game. It gets some elements right, but you generally don't get like two completely distinct individual personalities that are different from each other. So that's a potentially problematic thing. And also, if you believe that interpretation, you may think that people with mental disorders are naturally more likely to commit crimes like murder, which is also a myth and is not true. So yeah, that's another problematic thing. And also there's a whole list of other tropes, like there's a lie detector in the game, and lie detectors don't really work. They're just used to scare people who don't know that they don't work. They don't work, no.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, we
Lie
should
detectors
hook
are
you
not
up
real.
to a lie detector and just make sure of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So that's my little rant about tropes. And yeah, I'm sure there's like I'm not sure. I think there was a feminist frequency video about the femme fatale trope, and it might have mentioned her story, but I don't remember. Okay. And I'm going to post these slides, and there's some references here. You may want to read for
Post them.
longer in-depth
Yeah,
analysis.
they are.
I'll post them on
Okay,
Facebook.
they are very good, different perspectives on the same game. It's very interesting. You just kind of compare and contrast.
Yep.
So, okay.
All right.
All right.
So I think now we should open up the floor to discussion.
Yeah, we set the table. Now it's time to set
Do
up
you
the
wanna-
chairs.